Good morning. It's Sunday, January 16th. We are so happy to welcome Dr. Willie Cobb Jr. to our virtual Macomb Salel Lakeside. And before he begins, Rabbi Evan Moffick is going to talk to us. And he'll also introduce Dr. Cobb.
Shalom, friends. It's good to see all of you. What a day yesterday. What a day. I think we all felt horror, pain, sadness, and ultimately relief. Relief, of course, at the end of the hostage taking. But also, even with that relief, there's still at least I feel kind of a sense of queasiness, how that could have happened to anybody. That could have happened at our synagogue, could have happened at a neighboring synagogue. And it reminds us of our vulnerability and also reminds us of the scariness of the world in which we live. Charlie, Rabbi Charlie is a great friend, actually. So it's particularly, literally my wife and I were driving back from a lunch date with a friend of ours who's a priest, and we hadn't seen him in about a year, and we had lunch. Driving back, my wife's checking Facebook, and she said, "Oh my God," and starts telling me the story. First, I thought that can't, this can't be happening, and we got home and closely followed it like everybody, and I'm still processing. We know how vulnerable we are. We also know and are grateful for the community, the people. People rallied around that synagogue from every faith community in the area, police, other clergy, and there was just a huge upswelling and sense of support. And so I think we can be grateful for that, for our friends and neighbors in the community, for the support that we can provide for one another. You can all rest assured that we are always doing our best to protect our building, to be a place of hope, of safety, and that if anyone would like to talk more about it, I'm always here. I'm still a little shaken up by it, I can tell you, but simply, right now, I think we just express a sense of gratitude for the peaceful resolution, and we hope and pray that we can think through this and make better plans for the weeks and months ahead. We'll simply say a prayer that it's an ancient Jewish prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tivanu, matir asurim. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who frees the captive. Amen. So we have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Willie Cobb. Now, I got to tell you, I'll give him a little more formal introduction, but Dr. Cobb is just a really wonderful teacher and motivational speaker, somebody who really can teach and inspire us. And what's remarkable is that he spoke to our confirmation class, and I have a difficult enough time keeping our confirmation class engaged for about 10 minutes. And Dr. Cobb had them engaged for an hour on difficult subject matter in a wonderful, enlightening, and powerful way. And you could tell by the questions that the students asked afterwards that they were really listening, they were engaged. And that was just remarkable. And so we are just so grateful to have Dr. Cobb here with us today. Dr. Willie Cobb Jr. is a consultant that brings permanent and revolutionary changes to individuals and organizations, the kind of change that promotes a healthy work environment and that will help our community bring about growth and prosperity. A motivational speaker, educator, and chaplain. And I encourage you to ask stories about his chaplaincy, which during COVID-19, as he talked to our confirmation class, was quite powerful, who engages through a ministry of hospitality, welcoming everyone where they are and inviting them into the community. He focuses on leadership development, self-regulation, and compassion. And we are thrilled that he is joining us on this Sunday of Martin Luther King Day weekend. And just simply a time to educate and teach us. Dr. Cobb.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I am so sorry we can't be there in person. As a matter of fact, I took the whole day off just in case, somebody wanted to stay around and talk. And I still kept the day off anyway. So, and yesterday was the kind of day that really breaks my heart. And it's the kind of experience that our community and many communities have in common. And it's that kind of thing that we don't want to have in common. But unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that historically we have in common. It breaks my heart and it makes me sad. And I pray for all communities that have to go through that. We have to keep marching on. So the first thing I want to do is explain my little office here. I haven't been down here in a while because of the holidays. My kids took it over and they were staying down here, came home for Christmas. So I had to straighten it up a little bit. I have my gumball machine because I like toys. So that's one of the little toys I have back there. It's empty because I haven't figured out what to put in it yet. No gumballs. But my little flag back there, if you can see my flag, that's my grandfather's flag because he was in World War II. And you see two pictures back there. One picture, if you can see it, that's my motto. It says, get there, be there, stay there. That's what I help people do. I help people to get there, to be there, and to stay there. Wherever there is, that's up to you. And behind that picture is an image of two trees. And so there's a blank one on the other side. You can see at the bottom of those two trees are roots tied together. And so this is tied a little bit with your synagogue because that image actually comes from Dr. King, comes from a lesson I learned in my master's program. When I was doing my master's program, I was struggling. I had a class, a very difficult class, from this great theologian. He was this world-renowned theologian. And this theologian had taken classes he had learned from a greater theologian. That theologian was named Paul Tillich. Okay, and they said this theologian was coming to Loyola University. You have to take this class from this theologian because he learned from Paul Tillich. So you have to take him. I said, okay, I'll take this class from this theologian. I hated him. Oh, it was awful. He was miserable. He was ancient. He was boring. He was killing me. He was slow. He was doing things out of 1912. He was talking about Karl Rahner and Paul Tillich and how Karl Rahner and Paul Tillich did things out of 1800s and how they were doing things in the old-fashioned way and how they were good friends and how they did things out of the Vatican II. And I don't care. It's not 1912. And I was about to get my first B in my master's. It was not good. He gave the midterm. I failed the midterm. I didn't get it. And he said, you have to do a final. He said, you have to write this big 20-page paper for your final. And I just didn't get it. And then he said, go ahead, you can do whatever you want for your final. So I started doing my final on Dr. King. And there was this controversy with Dr. King. And the controversy was Dr. King plagiarized Paul Tillich. He plagiarized the work from Paul Tillich. And I started researching for 6 months Dr. King and Paul Tillich. And I came across the most fascinating information that Dr. King and Paul Tillich had a personal relationship. That Dr. King had written Paul Tillich several times And Paul Tillich gave Dr. King permission to have all of his work. He gave him permission to use whatever he wanted. And there's a personal note from Paul Tillich to Dr. King to use whatever he wanted of his writing. And he said, you can write my personal secretary and you can have anything you want of mine. And I had that personal note. I took a picture of that personal note. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I wrote down in my paper that Dr. King had a personal relationship, that they were tied together personally, that Dr. King and Paul Tillich were tied together. And then from that, Dr. King became a part of what was called the beloved community, that he was introduced to a guy named Royce, who had developed something called the beloved community. And you see, from that, I wrote this paper that actually got me an A in the class, because the teacher loved the paper so much that he gave me an A in the class. This little picture actually comes from that tied relationship together. Then I tie in what happened in Katrina, because in Katrina, they looked at the hurricane and they found out one structure was still there, the trees. When they found that the trees did not blow over during Katrina because they were tied in together at the roots. The roots tied in together and the trees didn't blow over. Like the relationship between Dr. King and Paul Tillich, all tied into each other and they stayed strong. Like all the relationships are tied in with each other. That's what my little picture is together. If we're all tied in by the roots, no matter what the storm is, we will not be blown over. That's my little picture there. That's what I got out of the relationship between Dr. King and Paul Tillich. No matter if Dr. King is considered a plagiarist, it's not true. No matter if Katrina and the winds blow us over, if we're tied in at the roots, we will not be blown over. That's what that little picture is. And it's my job to help people to get there, to stay there. No matter wherever there is, I help people to do that. So that's my big little soliloquy there. And then I got invited to your synagogue and I found out something amazing, something I didn't know. And I thought I was an expert in Dr. King. I found out that when Dr. King was in Chicago, I always thought he only visited one religious institution, because when he was in Chicago, we were always taught he visited one church, one religious institution on the south side of Chicago. And I'm walking through your synagogue and I see that he visited your synagogue. And I'm like, no, he didn't. They're like, yeah, he did. They're like, that's huge news. That's amazing. That's incredible. Nobody knows this, because they only teach us he visited Reverend Clay Evans. Like, no, he visited another religious institution when he was here. Like, people should really know that. That's a pretty big, I would have written that in my paper had I known. That's pretty big. I tell people now, and they're like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, Jesse Jackson should have told me. And so that's pretty fascinating for those of us who really love Dr. King's history, because it is Dr. King's philosophy, a beloved community, that helps me to get where I am right now. It was absolutely his philosophy, because he took that philosophy of the beloved community that keeps me strong. I want to share with you a couple of recent things that's happened to me. A couple of recent things that keeps me absolutely strong. One about my physical health, and one a little bit even more recent. This wall is going to change in a couple of weeks. It's going to have my doctorate diploma and all of my diplomas on it. I'll share with you very quickly about my doctorate diploma. I'm going to talk to you about all of my diplomas. When I was 5, I died. And I had rheumatic fever. I had strep throat. That strep throat turned into rheumatic fever. My mother tells me that the doctor came out and told her, your son's going to die. Said he did die, but your son's going to die. And if he doesn't die again, he will never walk again. My mother says she went home, she went into her little closet and she prayed. And she believed that's the reason why I lived. The doctor said it makes no sense why he lived, but he did. So I lived, and I struggled my whole life. I have 4 learning disabilities. I can't read, write, or spell like other people do. And so I've struggled my entire life with these learning disabilities. That's going to come back because there's a significant reason why. So I struggled with these disabilities. I graduated from high school at the age of 20 because of these disabilities. I graduated from college at the age of 40 because of these disabilities. I graduated with what's called the University Without Walls. I got my master's at the age of 50. And I got my doctorate when I was 57. But I didn't get my diploma until this year. I didn't get my diploma until this year. I should have gotten my diploma in 2019. I didn't get my diploma because of racism. Flat out, unadulterated racism. I should have gotten it in 2019, but I faced some pretty daunting problems at the Catholic Theological Institute. And just 2 days ago, the president of the institute, I talked to her and she apologized for the racism that I faced. She absolutely apologized because the institution promised me a scholarship that they did not give me. They promised me a $3,000 scholarship that did not show up. And so we had an agreement. We had an agreement in writing. I paid my final tuition, and at graduation, there was a blank piece of paper in my diploma saying, you still owe us $3,000. And when I went in, they said, well, there is no scholarship. And my job was going to pay, it was actually an $8,000 tuition bill left over. My job was going to pay $5,000. One of my teachers held my final grade for 2 months. I had 2 days to get that grade or my job wasn't going to pay. He just held it. He held it and he held it and he held it. I finally wrote a letter, an email, explaining if I didn't get this grade in today, my job wasn't going to pay the $5,000. I've named the teacher. The head of my committee sent me an email back saying I was wrong for writing the email. He made me apologize. The teacher submitted the grade a day ahead of time. And I had to go into my job and apologize. And because I was the chaplain, they allowed me to submit it. It was like hours before it was too late. And I kept asking them, where's the scholarship? For 2 years. Where's the scholarship? There was no reason for it. I'd asked one president. I asked several different people. There was no reason for this scholarship not to be there. Finally, this new president comes in and she admitted it was just simply discrimination. There was no other reason for it. And she even thanked me for not disparaging the university, not disparaging them these last 2 or 3 years. Why didn't I do that? Dr. King's beloved community. Because it's our job to keep loving people no matter how awful they are. That's what Dr. King's goal is. He called it the beloved community. It's our job to bring holy hospitality even to the worst people, to help them change, to help them to grow. That's our job, to help them to be better people. So I want to go backwards a little bit to my learning disabilities. If you were to look at my websites, you would see somebody who physically looks different. I physically look different. So I want to go back to when I was 5. There was a reason why I almost died. Now I know what that reason is. I have faced discrimination my whole life because of cultural ignorance, because of racism, because doctors and people around me didn't understand about cultural discrimination. I never understood that my weight problem would be just as bad and discriminatory as the race problem. I suffered a weight problem as much as I did a race problem. I never knew that the two would be tied in together. I've had a weight problem my whole life. At my height, I weighed 400 pounds. I've seen discrimination, as much discrimination within the Black community because of weight as I have racism. I've seen discrimination because I was so dark. I was so dark, I was blue-black. I've seen discrimination within the Black community because I was so dark. I was so dark because of a physical problem I had. I was literally blue-black. I've had people recently come up to me and say, "You're not as dark as you used to be." That was a physical problem I had. And that physical problem, that's a racism problem. So this is how it looks. I almost died so many times because of this problem. I recently found out I have celiac disease. And that change in my life has saved my life. It has absolutely saved my life. My doctor showed me a graph of my weight loss. So over the last 3-4 months, I've lost like 80 pounds. Over the last 6 months, I've lost 100 pounds. So I've gone from 400 pounds to 300 pounds. I've lost enormous body mass. So I've lost inflammation. So I'm literally half of the body mass I used to be. So what I found out is in my family, we have this problem with inflammation. It's hereditary. Comes from our grandmother who has this problem. So when I was a kid, I had this problem with the celiacs and nobody knew it. I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and I told them there's something wrong, and they didn't listen. In 2014, I went to a doctor and I said, my stomach hurts. He totally ignored me. I said, I need to take a couple of weeks off because I'm severely depressed. He said, I can't give you a couple of weeks off. He sent me to go get a colonoscopy. A year later, he hadn't read my colonoscopy. I went back to his office. I said, my stomach hurts. He said, oh, he read my colonoscopy a year later. He said, oh, you have a serious stomach problem. You should take some time off of work. I said, that was a year ago. It took him a year to read my colonoscopy, and he still misdiagnosed me. He didn't diagnose that I had celiac disease. I'm going to be a little graphic. I hope you don't mind. I said to another guy, I need another colonoscopy. He refused to give it to me. I said, nobody should have bowel movements 3 times a day, the size of baseball bats, and smell like sewage. I said, they are the size of my leg. He said, oh, you just need some probiotics. I said, no, they smell really bad 3 times a day. I said, something's wrong. He said, oh no, you just need a probiotics. I said, this makes no sense. I went to a dentist. I said, I have these sores in my mouth. He said, oh, you just chew your gums. Said, something's wrong. Over and over and over again. I had every single sign of celiac disease, but nobody knew or believed that a Black person could have celiac disease. Nobody. One doctor even told me Black people don't get celiac disease. My next door neighbor across the street, told me Black people don't get celiac disease. These people almost killed me. I had one doctor who told me, I think you have a problem with bread and with pasta. One doctor. I'll never forget it. I went into her office and she said, here's the problem. You have to give up bread. I said, I hate bread. She said, oh, okay. She said, you're gonna have to give up pasta. I said, pasta turns to paste in my mouth. She said, your body has been trying to tell you something your whole life. Everybody else was treating me as a stereotype. They were treating the symptoms. They weren't treating me. They were treating the stereotype. They were not treating me. I've been talking with my oldest sister. We talked last night. We've talked about my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my cousins. It looks like about 10 people in my family have the same problem. I've had 3 brothers to pass away recently who have the same problems. We all have a problem with it. I have a niece who weighs 400 pounds. She has the same problems. My hands used to shake uncontrollably. That's a sign of celiac. And nobody in my family wants to listen because they believe only white people get celiac disease. Stereotypes. I've done the research, and my learning disabilities comes from celiac disease. Celiac disease causes learning disabilities. Why? Because celiac causes a lack of nourishment. I used to have a round belly. You see those kids on the news where they say this child gets no vitamins? My wife used to say, why are your legs so skinny and your belly so round? Because I was getting no vitamins, no nourishment. I look like one of those little African undernourished babies with a really round head. You can go back and look at any one of my pictures. Go to the SSA, University of Chicago School of Social Service, you'll see my picture. I have this really round head. That's a lack of nourishment. That's inflammation. So I was getting no nourishment. So when they did a scan of my head, my corpus callosum that connects the left hemisphere from the right hemisphere, your corpus callosum is supposed to be so long. Mine is too short. So during the development, my brain development, I didn't get enough vitamins. So my corpus callosum didn't grow long enough. That caused the learning disabilities. So the celiac disease caused my learning disability. It has everything to do with Dr. King's beloved community, because despite all of my learning difficulties, I still learn how to love and build a beloved community. Because there's a guy named Dr. Claude Anderson who believed that the violence in the community comes from a lack of nourishment within the community. And if we get people the proper nourishment within the community, they will learn how to love more, how to build more beloved communities. If we get people the proper resources, we will learn how to build more beloved communities. We have to learn how to truly heal people to build beloved communities. We'll never get to truly love one another if we don't get people the proper resources. A lot of angry people out there. And we will never heal communities without the proper resources. That's how we build beloved communities. That's how we create wonderful, loving, nourishing communities. I was walking around in tremendous pain my entire life, and I never shared it with anybody. Imagine how many young people, how many people out there are walking around in so much pain. So we have to find the proper resources to help heal people. We have to find ways to help heal communities. It was Dr. King himself who finally, at the end of his life, decided that it wasn't about poor Black people, it was about all of God's children. And at the end of his life, later on in the 60s, he came with the Poor People's Campaign. It wasn't just about poor Black people, it was about the Poor People's Campaign, all of God's children. And so if we don't deliver resources to everybody, we will never get to the beloved community. So the beloved community is about all of God's children, finding the proper resources to help heal all of God's children. And that's one way we do it, bringing the proper resources. That's how we build the beloved community. We can talk about the beloved community, but if we don't have the proper resources, we can forget the beloved community. We can talk about kumbaya, and we can talk about holding hands. We can talk about how we help, but if we don't know how to deliver it, it will never work. And one of the ways we do that is bringing the proper resources. And this is one of the ways, making sure people have the proper resources. Okay, now I'm ready for more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb. And I would like to say, your whole message teaches us about Dr. King and things we can work on for this week and at all times. Let's see if I have any. I'm going to just put a gallery view. Questions? You know me, I'll have a question. Can you tell us a little bit about your how things have been going during COVID and some of your outreach?
COVID has been extremely difficult. The beginning of COVID was some of the worst times of my ministry. At the very beginning, we had no idea what COVID was. People were just, I had never seen so much death, ever. So the outreach became extremely difficult at the beginning of COVID because we had no idea what it was. Now COVID is a little bit more difficult because people refuse to get vaccinated. So COVID has become different because now we're trying to help people get vaccinated. So we have those who are vaccinated, and the outreach is different with those, between those who are vaccinated and those who are not vaccinated. And so we're dealing with those people who, so it's right now it's a little bit difficult because we have to deal with the PTS. Those people who are the nurses and doctors trying to help heal them from the PTS they're suffering. So we're doing a lot of ministry there, helping them heal from all the death they've seen. So we're doing a lot of ministry there, helping them to remember the people who've passed away, their loved ones, their friends, and their families. And then trying to convince some of those people to get vaccinated. We have lots of people who believe that they should not get vaccinated. I mean, we've had people who their loved ones' lungs who have just been gone, their lungs are gone, and still believe that they shouldn't be vaccinated, or who actually believe that COVID doesn't exist. They absolutely believe COVID doesn't exist while their loved one is dying from COVID. And so we're in a strange place right now. We will have people literally dying from COVID and their loved ones saying, you gave them COVID with this medicine. So it's a strange, strange time. We are in a strange time.
Yeah.
So we're still healing people, trying to heal people who have the PTS, nurses who don't want to be there. So we're losing a lot of staff because we never healed from last year. It's a strange place to be.
Corey Klein wants to know, what are the most critical resources needed first? Where to begin and where can we begin?
Right now, we're criticizing first responders. And I'm shocked we're doing that. We went from applauding responders to criticizing them. And we need to go back to thanking first responders. We need to go back to appreciating doctors and nurses. And we're forgetting about the housekeepers, and we're forgetting about the janitors, and we're forgetting about those other critical people. We can't forget about those people. So one of the things that other people can do is start appreciating those people as well. So we need to start thanking those people too. Those people who clean the rooms, those people who take care of the security guards and the people at the front desk. That's something that everybody can do. Saying thank you to those people because they do a fantastic job. So we got to go back to thanking those people because they show up every single day. Because one of the biggest problems we're having is CNAs. If the CNAs don't show up, we're in big trouble. And they're not showing up. And they don't make a lot of money. I mean, they're paying nurses a lot of money. They're not paying CNAs a lot of money. And the CNAs are really getting tired of this. And if I told you what a CNA did, if I told you what a nurse's aide did, you would be shocked. If you knew what they did to help keep your loved one alive, you would just be stunned. And we have no appreciation for those people. What they clean, oh my God, what those people clean up. They have to turn our loved one. They have to bathe them. They have to wash them. They are saints, and they make so little money. We really have to appreciate those people.
What techniques would you recommend to help combat racism in the workplace?
That is a great question. Whoever asked that question, thank God you asked that question.
Thank you, Joe Zinman.
So we have made a huge mistake with D&I, diversity and inclusion. They've made a huge mistake. They've taken diversity and inclusion and they stuck it in HR. That's the dumbest place for it to be on the planet. What they've done is they've stuck it and they put it in a closet. Don't let them do that. We need to be having discussions like this on a regular basis. We need to have communications. We need to be working with people and talking to people on a regular basis. You need to have working workshops. So you have to have committees, and those committees need to be talking about biases. Biases are actually good. Excuse me. Biases are not bad. So you have biases that you can work with. When we take biases and we pretend that biases are just devastating all the time, we make a mistake. We have to understand our biases and how we use our biases. We can either use our biases for good or we can use our biases for bad. So if you just take the diversity and inclusion and stick it in HR, then you'll never get anything done. So you need to have working committees, and those committees need to be working on a regular basis, where you need to meet at least once a month and you talk about what's happening at work on a regular basis, how you're working together, how you communicate together, how you work with one another, how you work with one another culturally, on a sexual base, within the sexes. So it has to be on a regular, ongoing basis. If you only talk about it once a year, you've done nothing. That's where it's a mistake right now. They've stuck it in HR and it's meaningless. If you're not doing it on a regular basis, you're not doing anything.
We have a very robust DEI committee, and it has many subcommittees. What would you see as the most important priority?
But may I answer this question? Somebody asked.
Oh, sure.
About white privilege.
Yes, go right ahead. That's Holly. Yes.
You're not going to like my answer. So I will turn you to my workshop on YouTube on white privilege, because that's a long answer. So don't be shocked here, okay? There's no such thing as white privilege. It doesn't exist. White privilege is a made-up term. There is only privilege. We all have privilege. When you use the term white privilege, you give racists an opportunity to have an upper hand and say, now you're all just racist. I really ask you to look up, go to Willie Cobb on YouTube on privilege, and I give a 15, 16-minute talk on the problem with white privilege. So there's a problem with that concept of white privilege. So the real problem is, well, it's a really long, complicated issue. I'm sorry. The concept of beloved community is beautiful, metaphor.
So how do you appeal to those people who do not want to associate with persons of color and cannot understand that with interlocking roots, we can together be stronger?
That's another great question. And that's a very difficult one. Sometimes, and unfortunately, those are the people who run organizations. Those are the people who are the bosses. That is a fantastic question. And then that's when you have to try and appeal to the other people around you and let them know that that person is just a flat out racist. That's when you have to be strong. I once wrote a paper that said, power can only speak truth to power. That's when you have to be powerful and tell the other people around you that that person is really a problem, that that person is racist, that that person is uncomfortable with the other people who are not like them. I've had to do that. I've had to do that about Black people. I've had to go to management and say, that person is not comfortable with white people, and you need to be careful. So we assume that Black people can't be racist, and that's not true. That's simply not true. That's another complicated issue that we won't have time for here. But Dr. King's beloved community is about all God's children, not just one race. So that's when you have to have the power to say to other people, be careful of that person because they are exclusive. You may not be able to appeal to that person.
I put your YouTube link in the comments, and let's see, Marcia, I think our community at Macomb is very caring, but we still do not realize how racist most of us behave. We do not understand how deep it goes. Thank you for your remarks. And I think it's something that it's not a one and done. You have to keep working, and that's what our committee is doing. I think Corey Klein wanted to know about the critical resources. Where do we begin regarding racism? What can we do?
The fact that we know this can't be it. If you think we have one conversation and that's it, that's racist in itself. You can't have one conversation. There are groups out there, and I won't mention them. They make a whole lot of money. See, I have a certification in diversity and inclusion, and I hate one conversations. They will come in and they will make you feel good, and you'll end up crying afterwards. And the white community will say, oh, I have so much white privilege. I don't care about your white privilege. I don't care. You want to know what privilege is? I'm going to tell you what privilege is. I told you about my celiac disease, and somebody asked, what does this have to do with the beloved community? I'm going to tell you what real privilege is. The only reason why I found out I have celiac disease is because I have privilege. The doctor that I go to is a world-renowned doctor. She's the #1 doctor in the city of Chicago in bariatrics. She gets to see princes. Literally, people from around the world come and see her. She turns down wealthy people. I get to see her because I know her mother. The only reason why I get to see her. Her mother made her see me. When I signed up, they gave me the last person in her office. I called her mother. Her mother called her. How do I know her? I did her brother's wedding. That's privilege. I'm not white. That's flat out privilege. And if I was going around saying only white people have privilege, I'm going to tell you another one. I learned what privilege is as a senior in high school. As a senior in high school, a Black kid came up to me and he said, I hate you. I said, why do you hate me? He said, because you have privilege. I said, I don't have privilege. What are you talking about? Only white people have privilege. This little boy taught me what privilege was. He said, "Where do you eat lunch?" I said, "I eat lunch in the faculty lounge." He said, "None of us little black kids eat lunch in the faculty lounge." He said, "When was the last time you turned in homework?" I said, "I'm the senior class president. I don't turn in homework." He said, "You have privilege." So I went to my church and I talked to my priest, Father Jerry. I said, "Father Jerry, can you believe that little black kid said, I have privilege?" I said, "Father Jerry, black people don't have privilege." He said, "Willie, sit down." He said, "Where did you eat breakfast this morning?" I said, "At the rectory, dining room table." He said, "Where are you going to eat dinner tonight?" I said, "At the dining room table right here. What are you talking about?" He said, "Let me see your keys." He said, "What key is this?" I said, "That's the key to the gym." He said, "And Willie, what key is this?" I said, "That's the key to the upstairs rectory." And then he said, "Do you realize you're the only one in the entire house that has the key to the rectory upstairs other than the pastor?" He said, "I'm the priest. I don't even have the key to the upstairs rectory. You are privileged." But we teach people only white people have privilege. It's not true. It's simply not true. Privilege is something different. It truly is. We have to build the beloved community. And the only way we do that is we constantly work on it. It can't be a one and done. We can't keep bringing in groups that make us feel bad or make us feel good. We have to have what I call a safe, sacred space. We have to have somebody we can go to where we ask difficult questions, somebody we trust, somebody who won't get their feelings hurt when we ask them these difficult questions. Somebody we can say, "Oh, I think I said something racist. Can you answer me?" And they won't be offended by it. That's the only way we get this solved. So I'm that person for people at my job. The doctors can come to me. The people can come to me. And that's what they're afraid of. So if you don't have somebody you can come to, it gets prolonged. So you can say stupid stuff to. So you can ask the dumb questions to. So you can go to and say, okay, let me give you a perfect example. My daughter came to me and said, "You're transphobic." I said, "What are you talking about?" And she educated me. She educated me to no end. She cried. She said, "Dad, you are homophobic." I said, "I am not." She said, "You are." And then I went back and looked at it and said, uh-oh, my daughter is right. My religion made me homophobic. And I went back and looked at my history and went, uh-oh, my 16-year-old just educated me. And since then, I have literally saved 5 transgender kids' lives. See, that was from God himself. Because those transgender kids were about to come into my life and he needed me. And that was a difficult 6 months. I had to go through my own desert. I had to be confronted. So in my doctoral thesis, you will see a chapter on fathers who raised transgender children. That wasn't easy for me because I was just wrong. And the only way we're going to confront these things is to admit when we are wrong. I was homophobic, I was wrong. And I have to confront other religious people when they are wrong. And that was a religious thing. And that's the way it is with racism. I had to learn what pronouns were. Somebody said to me, "What is your pronoun?" And I went, and I thought I was an educated man. I'm Willie Cobb. No, idiot. And so another really quick story. A transgender woman came into the hospital. She wouldn't even talk to me because she thought I was going to judge her. This was right after my daughter fixed me. And then she sent me a note. The doctor had left after she had testicular cancer.
Mhm.
The doctor left and didn't give her pain medicine
Mhm.
because he thought she was drug seeking. I had to go all the way to the owner to get her pain medicine. She reached out to me for help. I will forever be proud of that. But God had to fix me first. So we have to be challenged on our blind spots. I had a blind spot. That's how racism works. That's the beloved community. Everybody belongs.
I think it takes a great person to admit that they're wrong. No one likes to say that they're wrong. I do want to report back to you. The last time I saw you, I shared with you that my daughter teaches, she's on the lead team in Washington, D.C. in the inner city. Most of her teachers are Black, and many of them did not want to get vaccinated. And that the school in DC, the mayor said, you have to be vaccinated if you're going to teach. And I said to you, what should she do? And you said back to me, don't coddle those teachers.
Right.
And I hope they put their foot down. And I want to report back, they put their foot down and some teachers quit. And I think that to be in this position of science versus non-science and to, trying to make different rules for different people, I found great comfort in your response to me. So
I'm happy. Let me just answer that really quickly. It is, do not buy into that, or Black people have seen this experimenting on them their whole lives. This is not the same. How do we know that? Somebody asked earlier again, what does this have to do with the beloved community? Here's what we know. We know that a lot of Black people died from COVID because they had low vitamin D.
Mhm.
This is a fact now. They're now doing studies on it. I got COVID because I had low vitamin D. The bariatric doctor I went to confirmed it. I was one of those Black people who had low vitamin D. I wasn't taking care of myself. And so now we've done the research. Now we know, now my vitamin D level is 50, not 20. And so those Black people need to know the truth now. Get the real truth. We have the evidence. This is not the same. This is not an experiment. Black and Hispanic people helped put this into place. This is not the old experiment. There were Black people involved. Give them the information.
Well, we're here at 11. I don't know. Let me just see if I can see anyone who may have a last question. We certainly thank you for coming to our community, and I know that we'll have you back again. I thought Rabbi Evans' testimonial that you could keep the confirmation. Anyone who can keep the confirmation kids. Listen, Rabbi Evan is pretty animated. So we can only say.
It's a tough job. It's a tough job.
It's a tough job. So we just thank you so much. And we hope that we hope that everyone takes this next day to do something for themselves, to remember that it's Martin Luther King Day. And if your kids have the day off of school, read to them, educate to them. I don't think it's a day for being off of school, and I'm sure Dr. Martin Luther King wouldn't like that either. But it gives you an opportunity to sit with your children, sit with your
Parents of
grandchildren.
teenagers don't like that either.
Yeah. You are correct. So I want to thank everyone, and we'll see you this week. And it's been a great morning. Special thanks to Rabbi Moffat for starting us off. We thought about yesterday, and we continue on today, as I'm sure some of that story will unfold. All right, it's good to see everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.